Welcome to Gospel Tangents, the best source for Mormon history, science, and theology. I'm Rick Bennett. In our final conversation with Mary Ann Clements, she's one of the authors of Secret Covenants, New Insights into Mormon Polygamy. We're going to talk more about polygamy skeptics and also about land deeds that either prove or disprove, maybe, something about Section 132. So you won't want to miss this conversation. Yeah. So, like I said, I've read 3. It was you and Claire. I should have thought of Bill. I didn't think of Bill. But Mark, so I thought that was great.
Yeah, Mark's been really good about trying to... He's really good with dealing with people who do not believe that Joseph Smith initially practiced polygamy. They think it came with Brigham Young later. Mark's been really up on debating with them.
Yeah,
and
he's much more patient than me. I will ask this, because I kind of want to go there a little bit. There's been some debate in the skeptic circles that the William Clayton journal is forged.
Right.
What would be your response to that?
My response to that would be I don't agree with that argument.
Okay.
And the reason why, and it's interesting because it goes into the land deeds, which I've been neck deep into Nauvoo land deeds recently. But it part of it came from Don Bradley when he was on a podcast, I think it was Word Radio. He had mentioned that the William Clayton diaries, one element that actually confirmed them or validated them was the July 12th, 1843 deeds to Emma Smith, because that was supposedly the day that the polygamy revelation was written. Hiram thought he could convince Emma of it, but then Emma vehemently denied it. But as a result of all this whole conversation, a decision was made to deed Emma all the unencumbered lots in Nauvoo. And so... and then William Clayton's journal, just a couple days later, then also talks about, okay, we drew up the thing and we gave her the lots in Nauvoo. And so when Don Bradley was talking about it, he's like, this actually confirms it because we have the deed, or I should say, we have the recorded copies of the deeds. First, that was done in the Nauvoo Register book in 1843, so fairly soon after, but that was recorded by William Clayton, so a lot of people don't trust it. But then later on in July of 1844, so just after Joseph Smith died, it was recorded in Hancock County deed records. And so from Don Bradley's perspective, that actually confirms the story from William Clayton because we can see that all of these lots were deeded to her. However, and it's really interesting, there are some people that see that those same deeds actually disprove William Clayton's journal.
Okay.
Because... and this has been good to bring that up. So Michelle Stone did some research on this, and she was able to find, which is fascinating, a deed that was made out on July 12th, 1843. It's not signed, so it was never completed, it was never official, but it's fully written out. It has all the boilerplate language, and it has tons of properties that Joseph Smith is deeding to his brother Hiram. And most of those properties end up being the same properties that are later deeded to Emma. And so she argues that because we haven't explained why Hiram was getting these properties, obviously it couldn't have been for polygamy because Hiram was getting this and that wasn't the polygamy thing. And she doesn't understand why the Joseph Smith Papers people would label it a draft. She disagrees. She's like, why are we calling it a draft? It's like, well, it's a draft because... they scratched out Hiram's name and they put Emma's name on it, like on the back of the thing. So that's why they called it a draft. Also, it was never signed. It was never recorded anywhere. It's a draft. But it's interesting because then she also found another draft. This time but it's dated the same day, July 12th. July 12th, this one's to Emma. And it lists all the lots, except it lists an extra lot that we don't have on the county records. And then it goes through, but it doesn't finish the rest of the deed, the boilerplate language where they say, we guarantee, warrant, all this stuff at the very end. It doesn't finish it, but it does have one of these little lots scratched out. And so Joseph Smith Papers people, very clearly, this was another draft, but it needed to be adjusted. So we don't have the actual draft that was ever finished. We don't, which is totally normal with property records. It's actually unusual to have the original deed. What we usually are dealing with are copies that are made into either, usually county records. So we do know that a deed eventually did exist. We know that it was certified by a justice of the peace. We know that they put their signature on it. We don't have a deed that has that particular signature. We know the deed itself was dated 12th of July. We know that the date that this person certified it was the 15th of July. And those match the two dates in William Clayton's journal that he talks about doing this transaction. What other people see is they're like, no, these are two different transactions. But it's like, it's pretty clear when you compare all of these deeds together, they're all referencing pretty much the same properties. It's all the same transaction. So in my mind, I agree with Don Bradley. This is actually validation of William Clayton's journal, but other people see it as clearly William Clayton was lying because there were two transactions, one on the 12th, one on the 15th, and they don't think that historians are responsible because they keep conflating the two. So, yeah.
So, wait a minute. Let me make sure I understand this. So there were the same deeds were trying to be given. Joseph was deeding them to same properties. Joseph was deeding them both to Hiram and to Emma for the same properties.
So we have a record. Yeah, the original deed that was made up was intended for Hiram. He was going to deed a bunch of these properties to Hiram, and it's not an exact overlap of the deeds, but significant amount. It's clearly this is coming from the same idea.
Why would he deed these to Hiram?
See, and that's the question. No one's answered that. But in my mind, on July 12th, but Hiram's name is scratched out. On the back of that deed, Hiram's name is scratched out and Emma's name is written in. Okay. Which to me, if Hiram was dealing with Emma that day because he was trying to justify something and then a decision was made for the lots to go to Emma instead, like to me, I'm like, that matches. Like Hiram was in the whole mix that day. Like, so we don't know why Joseph was originally giving them to Hiram, but we do know from William Clayton's journal why a decision was made to instead give those lots to Emma.
Theoretically, Hiram goes to Emma. I'm going to convince Emma that polygamy is okay. Got the revelation here. This is the story where she might have thrown it in the fire, maybe not.
Exactly.
But whatever happened. But I know there was a thing where I think Joseph said that Hiram got
a tongue lashing or something
that he'd never had before. And Joseph had warned him, I don't think Emma's going to go along. Yeah, no. I'll convince her.
So that's the thing. We have Emma, Joseph, and Hiram all interacting on that same day.
Okay. And so the idea was Emma's like, if you want to go through this, I'll get a divorce, and I want these lots for my son financial security.
That's the implication. I can't remember the exact wording in Clayton's diary, but the idea is that the traditional understanding is she wants some sort of financial security for her and the kids. And so how people...
Because this is also the story where, correct me if I'm wrong, isn't it where Joseph's kind of offering Emma William Marks to be a plural husband?
I don't know about that.
Okay,
I don't know
maybe I'm
about
getting that story mixed up, but
yeah. So the lots are deeded to Emma, and most people are like, oh yeah, so she could sell them and then later get money for it. Probably not. Probably so she could rent. So it would be a continual income for her and the kids. So I'm just saying, probably wasn't meant for her to sell them. This was meant to be her residual income to help support her children, to make sure they had financial security, because if he's having all of these other wives, they are all laying claim. And if it's true that he's giving land to his other wives, she may be a little bit sensitive about that.
Right.
All of that is conjecture. We don't know for sure.
Okay.
But what we do know is that William Clayton is tying what happened with the whole polygamy revelation, and he ties it to a decision was subsequently made to deed Emma all the unencumbered lots, meaning any of the lots that had not already been assigned or promised to anyone else or under any sort of loan or anything like that.
And so would it be possible that these were lots that Joseph was going to give Hiram for church purposes or something, or...
Possibly for church purposes. Joseph had also been denied bankruptcy, so he may have been trying to put it in Hiram's name in order to get them out of his name for bankruptcy. However, that isn't totally work because he would still be considered owning those lots at the time that he tried to declare. Anyway, he may have been trying to get them off his name so that they wouldn't be considered part of his assets. The problem is that while married women could own property at the time, usually their husband still had a vested interest. And thank you for that with Mark Tensmeyer gave me that phrase. But their husbands usually had a vested interest. So whenever they would sell, they usually sold with their husband. And that's what ultimately ends up happening is that all of Emma's property, for various reasons, including the Steamboat Nauvoo disaster, is eventually considered Joseph's property. So then it gets taken to pay Joseph's debts. But the intent for Emma was most likely that she would rent those, and that would be that income that she could use for her kids.
Okay. So just to recap, make sure I'm following the story here. You always get involved in the most complicated stories.
I do. Sorry.
No, it's great, though. I think it's awesome. But so Joseph was going to gift these to Hiram
for an unknown reason. We don't know.
Maybe to avoid bankruptcy or whatever.
We don't know.
Hiram goes to Emma. Here's the polygamy revelation. She's like, I don't believe it. I'm on a divorce. Give me the lots. And so they do.
Well, we don't know if she asks for the lots. Like, I can't remember in William Clayton's journal how he phrases that.
And so, okay.
But whatever the original intent was, Hiram was supposed to get a lot of that land. And then a decision was made. His
name gets crossed out. Emma's name gets
crossed out. And Emma's name is... So the whole deed was written up in pen. It gets crossed out in pencil. And Emma's name is written in on the side. And then clearly we have another deed written up for Emma in pen where it goes through and it's listing a bunch of these lots.
That are almost identical. But it's clear they made a mistake. And one of them has a line crossed through it. So they never ended up finishing that deed. So that cannot have been the deed that was recorded. Some people think that was recorded. So the deed that was recorded would have gone to the county?
The deed that was recorded, we do not have a copy of that, which is very normal for property records. The deed that was recorded, it would have been written in ink. It would have the signature of the witness. It would have the signature of Joseph Smith. And it also would have the little certification acknowledgement at the bottom by a justice of the peace or some sort of notary.
Theoretically?
That would confirm and say, I, a justice of the peace, a recognized official of this county, am going to put my name and say, I know this person, Joseph Smith, who is selling this property, and this is indeed his signature. And then they put their signature on that. Then that deed would have been the one that was copied into the Nauvoo registry by William Clayton. So when you look at the signatures, it's all William Clayton's handwriting because he's just copying this deed verbatim. But they also copy that little certification by the Justice of the Peace. And then it's not until later in July of 1844 that William Clayton is having a conversation with Emma, and it's likely that he held that original deed and he had it recorded when he went down to Carthage, because we know he did go down to Carthage and had a bunch of stuff recorded. You can see it in the county records. But again, the county records did the exact same thing. They recorded the entire deed along with the signatures with the little thing by the notary. And then what they usually would do is on the original deed, they would say, recorded in this county by this person. And you usually had to pay a fee. That's why a lot of people didn't have their stuff recorded, because you had to usually pay a fee and you had to go down to the county seat or whatever. But yeah, it's actually very normal to not have the original deed.
It's easier to figure out if you recorded it with the county.
Yeah.
But yeah. Okay.
So that's what genealogists and historians usually are dealing with. We're usually dealing with the county records, the copies that are recorded in the official records.
So why do we have the drafts and not the...
That's the question. And we think it's because they were just keeping all the stuff. Because we have drafts of, letters. We have drafts of other stuff. It was probably because they wanted... You would think it would maybe to be reuse the paper, but the problem is the paper is all completely used up. So I don't know. I don't know why we have the drafts. And that's the big question, because people are like all suspicious. We shouldn't have these drafts. Well, we have them. So yeah, we can't answer that question of why Hiram was getting the properties. We can't answer the question of why we even have these drafts. And then people are suspicious because we don't have the actual deed, not understanding that it's not normal to have the deeds. We're actually very spoiled by the Joseph Smith papers that we do have a lot of the original deeds. Usually historians do not have those. And it's totally normal for these records not to be recorded for like weeks and even years afterwards. That's another thing people are suspicious about. Well, it wasn't recorded till later. That's normal. That's actually very normal with property records.
Okay. All right. Well, is there anything else we need to talk about?
Unless you want to go more into Nauvoo land records.
I'm good there. I've had my fill. But I will say this. So Marianne was super cool, and she gave me an extra copy of Secret Covenants. Now, this is going to be one of several interviews, I hope. Hopefully I'll get... Let's see. Let's go through the authors here really quick. Hopefully we've named them all. But I'm going to go through. So Cheryl Bruno is the main editor. Hopefully I can get her at MHA. We'll see. Claire, I'm hoping to get tomorrow. Mark, I'm hoping to get in September. Mark Tensmeyer, Claire Barris, I should say their full names. Christopher Smith, Don Bradley, Susan Staker. Oh, she's got I have to read that one. Magus and Good Wife on the Road to Secret Nauvoo. Abraham and Sarah, Joseph and Emma.
It ties in the Book of Abraham project.
Oh, okay, good, because I haven't read that chapter yet. John Dinger, who talks about the law because he's a lawyer. Nauvoo polygamy and the law, statutory and common law prohibitions. Todd Compton, were there eternity-only plural marriages in Nauvoo? I think the answer is yes. Have you read that chapter?
I've read that chapter. His answer is no.
The answer is no. Really?
Sorry, spoiler.
Oh, because that contradicts what Brian Hale says, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's interesting. Our wonderful Marianne Clements, Theodore Turley's Nauvoo Plural Marriages, a collection of cliffs.
That was Cheryl's title.
Devery Anderson on Willard Richards, Cheryl Bruno. That's just the hell of it, accounting for Emma Smith's denial after her husband's plural marriages. I need to read that chapter.
You need to read that chapter. It's actually based a lot on research that was done by Johnny Stevenson, and he passed away, and so she took a lot of his research, his notes.
Oh.
So that's really where a lot of that stuff from that.
Oh, interesting. And then William Victor Smith, Bill Smith, a brief biography of Joseph Smith, July 12th, 1843, Revelation on Marriage. He's in Provo. I don't know why I didn't think about reading his chapter yet. But at any rate, the reason I bring this up, so these are a collection of cutting-edge research on polygamy, and Marianne's given me an extra copy to give away. So go to gospeltangents.com/contest, and you could win one of these copies, and it's already got Marianne's signature on it. I'll try to get Claire's tomorrow.
Yeah, that'd be good.
And so maybe you'll get both Claire and Marianne's copies, or signed copy. So anyway, I'm excited that because I didn't even ask her, and she's like, "Do you want to give away a copy?" And I'm like, "Yes." So your chapter, the whole surrogate thing. I mean, I do know there was a story. I should look it up, about a David Cox, and there was a surrogacy
Frederick
arrangement.
Cox.
Frederick Cox.
It was Frederick Cox. It's actually mentioned.
David Cox is a descendant that I know.
I'm trying to recall which chapter. I can't remember off the top of my head which chapter it is.
Oh, is that in here too?
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's in Todd Compton's chapter. He talks about it.
Oh.
So the idea is, let me look at this real quick. So the idea is that this lady named Marianne Darrow, she married a guy named Edmund Richardson.
Right.
They had a couple kids.
Right.
But then Edmund had a surgery where he couldn't have any more kids.
Right.
And so they went and they talked to...
they went to Brigham Young and
Young.
You can't have any more kids. You should get a divorce because we need more kids, right?
Well, that's the thing is they were worried. Okay, so after this is Todd Compton's chapter. This is Todd Compton's chapter. After their conversion to Mormonism, Marianne was worried that having only 2 children would keep her and Edmund from exaltation, and counseled with Brigham Young. He advised her to have church-sanctioned sexual relations with another man in order to have more children. And the other man was Frederick Cox.
There we go.
And so she did. She ended up having, I think, 2 kids.
More. Yeah.
And then...
And he gave up all rights to the Richardsons.
It was considered Richardson's kids. And then so theoretically they had kind of a divorce, maybe. That was according to the family. And then she was married to this other guy, but then after having these couple of kids, they end up getting back married. So the question becomes so Todd actually talks about it, and he's like...
It's kind of polyamory, or
It is. It's kind of like polyandry, and there's no evidence, actually, that her first husband... So according to the family, the first husband had actually moved away from the town while she was married to this other guy. But D. Michael Quinn, he actually did a lot of research, and he was still living in that same town. So her first husband was still living in the town while she was having relations with this other guy. It had to have been uncomfortable. Yeah. But anyway, definitely kind of a polyandry type thing. And again, this is one of the elements that Todd Compton's like, this is clearly not an eternity only sealing. There was definitely conjugal relations with both guys happening, theoretically at different times, but anyway, so he goes through a lot of these kind of weirder stories, talking about, in Nauvoo, and he ends up coming out with the idea that there's no record of anyone actually saying eternity only. It's always time or time and an eternity. And so that's kind of a very simplified summary of his argument.
We'll have to
but I definitely recommend reading it to understand.
Okay, for sure. Well, very good. Well...
and also, I do have to say that the other reason surrogacy popped into my head is because years and years ago, I remember chatting with a guy who was a military chaplain, and he mentioned that he had known a couple where the guy was infertile, and so she had gone and had relations with one of their friends. They had all mutually agreed on it.
Wow.
And then she was able to get pregnant, and they had their kid. And he was like, I'm like, okay, if you're not going to do it, I guess that works. And he was shocked that a Mormon would think that was okay. I'm like, well, not in the church. That's not okay in the church, but it makes sense if you're,
outside the church.
If you're outside the church and just wanting to do it a relatively easy way. So, that's the thing. So I know these types of stories exist. And then when I just was not finding the right records with Sarah, and nothing was making sense with it, why couldn't I find these dumb records for either Sarah's boy or this boy that seems to match the same age, that's living in this household with this other guy? And eventually it all just came together. It was like, oh, they are the same kid, but they didn't want the circumstances of the birth to be known.
Wow. See, this is what an amazing researcher Marianne is.
It took years. It took years to figure out ultimately stuff.
Well, cool. Well, I won't keep you any longer, but Marianne Clements, are you going to MHA?
Not MHA.
Oh, that's
I can't swing it this year,
but
but
Sunstone,
definitely Sunstone.
Yeah,
I've got my Sunstone shirt on.
Yeah, your microphone's blocking your cool shirt. You got to move the microphone out of the way for a second. More than one way to Mormon.
Yep, and it's a nice rainbow celebration for June.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, I count you as just such a wonderful friend, and thanks. Thanks for giving me a book to give away. And so once again, gospeltangents.com/contest, and you could be a winner. And so thanks again. And what any other projects you're working on? I know you were going to work on the counterfeiting book. Have you started on that?
I have not started on
you've been
that.
doing too much
I've
genealogy?
been distracted with getting into this Nauvoo land deeds mess. So, because I actually really enjoyed doing property records research, so I was like, oh, really? We could actually use it as a polygamy argument, either for or against or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Nauvoo land records are a mess. So I don't have any big Mormon history projects right now.
Okay. Well, you need to get that book written.
I need to get the
counterfeiting.
counterfeiting stuff written. I do. This was a big deal.
Yeah,
this was
it
my
is.
first publication.
Yeah,
It's a
it's
big
good.
deal.
It's good. All right. Well, thanks again for being here on Gospel Tangents. Really appreciate it.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Marianne Clements. Marianne, thank you so much for giving me this book that I'm going to be giving away to one of you. It's autographed by Cheryl Bruno, Marianne Clements, and Claire Barris. And so go to gospeltangents.com/contest, and you might win this autographed copy. In our next conversation, I'm excited to talk to Claire Barris, and we're going to talk about the revelations of Joseph Smith about polygamy. Thanks for listening, and I hope you to continue to enjoy Gospel Tangents. Consider becoming a Patreon or go to gospeltangents.com/shop, and you can get a cool tie, a hat, or even a nice mug. You can also get a sweatshirt. So check it out at gospeltangents.com/shop.